Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and credit goes to Ant here for this one. Ant is a fan on the Discord server who hit me up and said, hey man, there is a change in Marvel Comics about Franklin Richards. And I was like, okay, let's take a look at this and let's see what's going on, right? So this comes out in the newest issue of Fantastic Four, issue number 26. And here's a funny thing. For people who don't know the history of Franklin Richards, they're freaking out. For people who do know the history about Franklin Richards, it's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It was always kind of that way. Okay, so one of the big changes they made here is there's a point in the story whereby Franklin is trying to find a way back to Krakoa. And he's met by Charles Xavier, who's reading his mind. And Charles Xavier says, no, you cannot come back to Krakoa. And when Franklin asks the reason why, Charles says, because you're not a mutant, right? According to Cerebro, you never have been one. That as a child, you dreamed of being different, special. Without intending to, you used your cosmic powers to alter every cell in your own body until it appeared as if you possessed the X gene. And so basically, he made himself to look like a mutant, right? Just kind of masqueraded himself, more or less, but he is not inherently a mutant. This is an accurate statement. And in fact, it kind of comes from two different sources. Now, it wasn't until, we'll talk about more whether that changed here in a minute. So wind the clock back here, right? Wind the clock back to Fantastic Four Annual number 6 and Fantastic Four issue number 103. Now, Fantastic Four Annual number 6 was written by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and issue 103 was written by Stan Lee and drawn by John Romita. But the idea behind this was that in Annual number 6, that's when Franklin was going to be born, right? And what you ended up finding out was that there were complications, that seemingly the power, or I guess the cosmic energy that gave Susan and Reed and those guys their energy, or gave them their powers, was effectively being siphoned off by Franklin, right? In the same way that, you know, a woman eats food and the baby kind of consumes it. If she doesn't eat enough, it'll cause problems for her. It was basically the same thing with regards to the energy she had. And so in order to balance those energy levels out, what Reed and Johnny and Ben Grimm did is they traveled to the negative zone and then grabbing something called the Cosmic Control Rod. And the Cosmic Control Rod is an artifact in the negative zone that's in possession of a guy named Annihilus that allows its user to basically wield cosmic energy in the most extreme degree, right? To basically control the fundamental laws of the universe itself. Annihilus uses it for his own personal benefit, right? So like keeping himself young, different things like that. But when a portion of that energy was siphoned off by Reed and it was brought to the main Marvel universe and given to Susan, that in Fantastic Four Annual number 6, a portion of that energy passed on to Franklin. And it basically meant that Franklin was born with the ability to alter matter on a universal scale, to alter matter on the atomic and subatomic level. Now, in Fantastic Four issue number 103, he was handed over to Agatha Harkness, and in issues 104, 105, 106, and 107, it was kind of established that Franklin just sort of had these powers as a result of the Cosmic Control Rod. But all that changed in Fantastic Four issue number 130, when the team's facing off against the Frightful Four, and the Frightful Four has some campaign where they're trying to get a hold of Franklin, and it's established that Franklin is a mutant for the very first time in Marvel Comics. Following that establishment, from that point going forward, Marvel always referred to Franklin as a mutant. And so you had the original source of his powers, then Marvel changed it in issue 130. It remained the status quo, and it has been ever since. And we've seen it in multiple sources, right? You see it in House of X, you saw it in, X-Men Fantastic Four, or whatever it was. You saw it in X-Men Unlimited number 14 back in the day. You saw it in Decimation, the Decimation storyline, the 198 one-shot comic that was like a list of all the mutants who were out there that are left and like the most powerful ones, and Franklin was listed among them. What happened now in this particular story is Marvel basically undoing everything that's happened since Fantastic Four Annual number 6 and basically going back to the original content. So I guess it's true that like they're making a great big huge retcon and a great big huge change, but not necessarily. They're setting things back to the way they used to be. And that's the big difference here. What you're seeing here is tantamount to like when Captain America Steve Rogers lost his super soldier serum, he passed the mantle on to Sam Wilson, who became the new Captain America, and then Steve Rogers regained a super soldier serum and went back to being Captain America again, right? It's a return to the way things used to be. The difference here is that a lot of people don't know this history about Franklin. And so in their mind, it's not necessarily, okay, Marvel's setting things back to the way they used to be back during like the 60s and 70s. In their mind is Marvel's just changing things willy-nilly. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with that. It's just not knowing the history of the character. But that's the way those things work. You know, that's the way way that Marvel Comics works. Marvel Comics introduces something, they'll change things up later on. The important thing to understand about this is that this is the end of Dan Slott's run as far as I'm aware. I think we get like a whole new writer and everything at this point. So likely this won't stay this way forever. And in fact, it'll probably go back to things being a certain way. The thing about Franklin is the fact that he was a mutant never really mattered in Marvel Comics. It was never really a relevant thing because you never really saw him doing things in comics that could only be done because he was a mutant. His ability to go to Krakoa, which is where all the mutants are located at and only mutants can go there, the only reason why him being a mutant mattered was because of that story. But when you go look at things like Heroes Reborn, where all the superheroes except for like the X-Men and Spider-Man died in a fight against Onslaught, which was when like the mind of Magneto and the mind of Xavier merged into a singular being, Franklin Richards resurrecting them all from the dead and putting them in a universe that he created of his own accord had nothing to do with the fact that he was a mutant. When Abraxas was freed, right, this representation of like destruction across the multiverse, whatever it was that he was, and Abraxas started killing every version of Galactus from across the multiverse, when Franklin Richards resurrected Galactus from the dead in that story, it had nothing to do with the fact that he was a mutant. When he resurrected Galactus from the dead and made him into his herald during Hickman's run, it had nothing to do with the fact that he was a mutant. So I don't really understand why people are kind of getting upset about that. The fact that he's a mutant is irrelevant in the face of all the things he's done because it never had anything to do with anything, right? It was never a focal point of that particular story. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's just a thing that he happened to be, but it's intriguing to me. I'm kind of curious to see where Marvel goes, but at the same time, I don't really care because again, it was never really anything that mattered. All I cared about with Franklin was the fact that he could just do cool stuff, right? That's all I cared about. That's the only thing that matters to me. And the fan theory that he controls the Marvel Universe, for those of you guys who don't know what that means, there is this fan theory that's been circulating around for a number of years that if you go and you look at the publication history of Marvel Comics, that Marvel always referenced current events, right? Like there's stories where the Fantastic Four meet with like Richard Nixon and stuff like that, who was a president at the time in a lot of those stories. And then when Fantastic Four Annual number 6 happened, that coincided with the publication of Marvel ceasing to reference modern day events, right? It was a way for Marvel to kind of suspend disbelief and just kind of say, well, comics happen at any point in time. But because of the fact that Marvel stopped referencing current events after Franklin Richards was born, then it led to this fan theory that Franklin Richards is the reason why no one ages. He's the reason why everybody is the same. Because Franklin would have these moments in his youth when he would use his powers, like age himself up into an adult, different things like that. He would make some slight alterations or some big alterations, but he wouldn't really know what he was doing. And that on a subconscious level, Franklin wants everything to stay the way that it is. That Franklin doesn't want things to change, right? So like the most hardcore of hardcore comic book fans. And the result of this is that Franklin used his powers unwittingly and basically froze the entirety of the Marvel Universe. So that's why Spider-Man isn't like 60 years old right now, right? I mean, which would make sense. He'd probably be older than that. Like he was a teenager when he first got his powers. So fast forward 40, 50 years, so he'd be in his 70s if we were following in real time. That's why those things haven't happened, because Franklin Richards subconsciously doesn't want them to be that way. And so he keeps things the way that the way that we're used to. Just a fan theory. I think it's a really cool one, but hopefully this kind of explains what's going on. Apparently a lot of people on Twitter are freaking out, but this makes sense to me, right? I'm okay with this. It makes perfect sense. It's just going back to the original history of Franklin Richards back in Fantastic Four Annual number 6, the way he was originally created, which is fine, because at the end of the day, whether he's a mutant or not, it doesn't matter. He's still a ridiculously overpowered character and can do pretty much anything he wants to in the universe. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.